War movies love to brag about authenticity, but let's get real. Nothing beats the chill of seeing explosions, mud, and history where blood was actually spilled. Some directors risked their budgets and their sanity to film on the very ground where real soldiers fought and died. So, does shooting on true battlefields make a movie more powerful, or is it just Hollywood showing off? Stick around. You'll find out which legends of the screen weren't just acting, they were standing in the shadows of real history. The Longest Day, 1962. Talk about guts. The Longest Day didn't just recreate D-Day. It marched right onto the beaches of Normandy, the very ground where the Allied invasion changed the course of history. This wasn't some dusty Hollywood backlot. The filmmakers staged chaotic battles, stormed through actual French towns, and pointed their cameras where bullets once flew thick and fast. Omaha Beach, Pegasus Bridge, St. Mary Église, names that echo in every World War II documentary, become living, breathing characters in the film. The movie is a logistical miracle, wrangling dozens of stars: John Wayne, Robert Mitchum, Sean Connery, and a parade of international legends. But the real star? Normandy itself. Extras included local residents, some of whom had witnessed the invasion as children, now replaying history on the same sands. The tide, the bunkers, even the unpredictable French weather, everything was real, unpredictable, and raw. And it shows. The land is scarred and haunting. You feel the gravity in every frame, the muddy chaos, the terror in the hedgerows, the solemn relief as battered soldiers cling to life. You can almost taste the salt and smoke. Critics at the time called it too big and too ambitious, but veterans recognized the soul of the real event. In the end, The Longest Day isn't just a war epic. It's an act of cinematic resurrection, letting you walk with ghosts. A Bridge Too Far, 1977. Most movies about World War II play it safe. Heroics, clean endings, lots of waving flags. Not A Bridge Too Far. Richard Attenborough's sprawling epic set out to do the impossible. Film Operation Market Garden, not just inspired by true events, but on the Dutch ground where the real plan fell apart. Arnhem Bridge, Nijmegen, and a clutch of villages are more than backdrops. They're silent witnesses, still haunted by the Allied gamble that went sideways. Shooting in the Netherlands, Attenborough staged massive battle sequences with tanks rumbling through streets that had felt the real thing. Residents who had grown up with the scars of occupation watched as smoke and gunfire returned, this time for the cameras. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was reopening old wounds, but with respect and a historian's eye for detail. The cast is an embarrassment of riches. Sean Connery, Gene Hackman, Anthony Hopkins, Robert Redford, each swallowed up by the scale of the setting. You can see the actors grappling with the weight of standing where young paratroopers once made desperate last stands. Local extras brought authenticity, and the Dutch authorities even shut down bridges for filming, causing minor chaos just like the original operation. Critics at the time didn't all appreciate the film's unvarnished look at failure and confusion. Roger Ebert wondered why anyone would film total defeat. But for veterans, the brutal honesty and sense of place made A Bridge Too Far essential viewing. Here, the dirt is real, the bridges are battered, and the ghosts aren't just on the page, they're everywhere the camera turns. Saving Private Ryan, 1998. Think you know what D-Day looked like? Think again. Steven Spielberg's Saving Private, Ryan doesn't just slap you with the horrors of Omaha Beach. It buries you under sand, shrapnel, and fear, thanks in part to filming that put actors and crew right into the teeth of history. While the infamous opening wasn't shot on the actual Omaha Beach, modern regulations wouldn't allow it. Spielberg's team used Ballinesker Beach in Ireland, chosen because it mirrors the geography of Normandy down to the last dune. But authenticity didn't stop at the sand. The production scouted real European villages to mimic the war-ravaged French countryside. Props, weapons, and even vehicles were obsessively researched and rebuilt to match what GIs would have felt, touched, and cursed at in 1944. Local Irish extras, descendants of their own war heroes, braved the same freezing surf, while combat veterans were consulted at every step. What's more, Spielberg made his cast endure a brutal boot camp, mud, exhaustion, hunger, the works. So that when the cameras rolled, the fear and fatigue weren't just good acting, they were real. Critics and audiences felt it instantly. Veterans in particular praised the way the movie captured the chaos, the sound, the sickening uncertainty, something that could only be conjured by honoring the geography and scars of the real battlefield. In the end, Saving Private Ryan didn't just bring D-Day back to life. It made sure you felt every grain of sand in your boots. Torah! 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 1970. If you want to make history hit home, there's nothing like filming on the site where it exploded. Torah! 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 Went for broke. Staging its thunderous attack scenes at Pearl Harbor, the actual Pacific base that saw the world change in a matter of hours on December the 7th, 1941. The production was as much a military operation as a movie shoot. Japanese and American crews collaborated, working on U.S. naval bases, floating actual World War II-era ships into the harbor for the carnage. Special permission was needed at every turn. After all, you can't just blow stuff up on sacred ground. But the result is breathtaking. Torpedo bombers racing over real water, plumes of smoke billowing from the same docks where sailors scrambled for their lives. Even the smaller details, airfields, hangars, and the shadows cast by warships are rooted in fact. Some of the ships and planes seen on screen had survived the war and now starred in a cinematic recreation of their darkest day. It's not just spectacle. The Japanese sequences were filmed with similar precision, capturing the tense atmosphere of military planning. Critics at the time called the movie cold, but for veterans and military historians, the accuracy and location were a revelation. This isn't just a war movie, it's living, thundering celluloid archaeology. Watch it, and you'll never see Pearl Harbor the same way again. Letters from Iwo Jima, 2006. Filming a war movie on the very soil where thousands fought and died is the kind of gamble few directors would dare. But Clint Eastwood wasn't interested in safe choices. For Letters from Iwo Jima, he took his cast and crew to the actual volcanic island, still pockmarked with bunkers, tunnels, and memories of one of Wo Fati's bloodiest battles. The production was more than a location shoot. It was a pilgrimage. The crew had to get special permission from the Japanese government, after all. Iwo Jima is sacred ground, a place of grief and national memory. The island's black sand and haunting silence shaped every frame. Even the air is different. The landscape itself seems to carry the ghosts of the past. Most of the cast were Japanese, many of them visibly moved by the gravity of performing on this hallowed ground. Eastwood, ever the stickler for detail, insisted on filming battle scenes in the very caves and trenches Japanese soldiers once used. The actors reportedly felt chills, sometimes from the weather, sometimes from a creeping sense that they weren't alone. The film dives deep into the perspective of the enemy, men who didn't want to be there, often terrified, sometimes desperate, always human. Critics and historians alike praise Letters from Iwo Jima for flipping the script and bringing raw, understated realism to the Pacific War. The end result isn't just a movie, it's a reckoning. When you watch soldiers huddle in the island's claustrophobic tunnels, you're not just witnessing fiction, you're walking the same volcanic corridors as history itself. Flags of Our Fathers, 2006. It takes guts to tell the story of the most famous photograph in American military history, but it takes even more to shoot it where the legend began. With Flags of Our Fathers, Clint Eastwood doubled down, bringing the story of the Iwo Jima flag raisers to the real beaches, cliffs, and caves of Iwo Jima. This wasn't about Hollywood fakery. This was about confronting the real cost of heroism in the exact spot where it was paid. Getting to Iwo Jima wasn't a simple fly-in, film, and fly-out deal. The island is still controlled by the Japanese military and rarely open to outsiders, so every day of shooting was a logistical puzzle and an emotional gut punch. Some scenes also took place in Iceland, but it was the time on Iwo Jima that set the tone for everything. The ground, still haunted by the war, seemed to resist the invasion of film crews, with bad weather and equipment malfunctions nearly derailing production. Eastwood reportedly encouraged his actors to walk the island and feel the weight of what had happened there before stepping in front of the camera. The result is a film that feels heavy with memory, When the Marines charge up Mount Suribachi, you can see it in their faces. They're carrying the history, not just their rifles. The movie doesn't sugarcoat the aftermath either, showing how war heroes are chewed up and forgotten once the cameras stop rolling. Watching Flags of Our Fathers is like watching old wounds open and close again, right where they first began. Patton, 1970. When it comes to on-location swagger, Patton is in a league of its own. Instead of recreating North Africa or Sicily on a California hillside, the production hauled its cast and crew across the Atlantic and shot battle scenes where the real General Patton himself once commanded. Sandstorms, ancient ruins, and sun-bleached hills in Morocco and Spain became the backdrop for George C. Scott's thunderous portrayal of the man, the myth, the tank commander. This wasn't just a case of, let's find something that looks similar. Some scenes were filmed on the actual sites of Patton's campaigns. Desert landscapes in Morocco stood in for Tunisia, and Sicily's villages doubled as themselves. The tanks and military hardware weren't just props. Many were real, some left over from actual campaigns or borrowed from European armies. The production's obsession with authenticity extended to every detail. The uniforms, the jeeps, even the mud. Everything was researched and sourced for accuracy. Filming overseas wasn't easy. The weather often refused to cooperate, and moving a small army of actors, crew, and equipment over rough terrain was a logistical nightmare. But when you watch Patton's forces roll across the desert, you know you're seeing landscapes that remember the tread of real war machines. The end result is a film that feels almost documentary. Epic, yes, but grounded. Patton isn't just a character study. It's a battlefield odyssey, told on the same ground where history once roared. Battleground, 1949. There's a reason veterans still talk about Battleground as the first Hollywood movie to really get it right. Shot near Bastogne, Belgium, where the real Battle of the Bulge unfolded, the movie brought its cast uncomfortably close to the cold, mud, and misery that defined one of the war's most desperate showdowns. This wasn't studio snow. This was Europe, barely recovered, still bearing scars from the war. MGM was desperate for a hit, so they gambled big on authenticity. The cast and crew worked with veterans who had fought in Bastogne. They tramped through icy forests, froze in foxholes, and learned to curse the weather like real GIs. For many, the landscape itself became a character, bitter, unyielding, and ever-present. Extras included locals, some of whom had witnessed or survived the siege as children. You can see the lived-in detail everywhere, from battered farmhouses to the fog that rolls in and out like a ghostly tide. When the bullets start flying and the artillery thunders, it's not just Hollywood magic. It's a recreation in the shadow of real pain and courage. Battleground won 2 Oscars and 2 Golden Globes, but more importantly, it won the respect of men who'd been there. For once, Hollywood didn't flinch from showing just how ugly, cold, and costly victory could be. Watch it on a winter night, and you'll swear you can feel the frostbite. The Bridge at Ramigan, 1969. Most war movies settle for Hollywood backlots or anonymous European fields. Not The Bridge at Ramigan. This production came about as close as humanly possible to the original Battleground. So close, in fact, that history almost repeated itself. While the real Ramigan Bridge had collapsed just days after its 1945 capture, director John Guillermin took his cast and crew to Czechoslovakia, filming on bridges nearly identical in structure and location, just a stone's throw from where the real action happened. But this wasn't just a technical stunt. The filmmakers wanted the mud, the atmosphere, the lingering Cold War tensions hanging in the air. They chose the Elbe River near Davos, with the permission of the Czechoslovak government at the time, a rare gesture of East-West cooperation. Local villagers played townsfolk, and some remembered the war all too vividly. Their faces carried real echoes of fear and resilience. The shoot was anything but easy. The Prague Spring erupted while filming, and suddenly, Soviet tanks appeared, not as props, but as a political reality. The crew scrambled to wrap up production before the Iron Curtain dropped again. Stars like George Segal and Ben Gazzara braved river crossings, explosions, and even live ammunition from nearby military exercises. The tension off camera bled into the film itself, adding a nervy authenticity you just can't fake. When tanks thunder across the bridge or exhausted GIs take cover in rubble, You feel the grit and peril that made the original battle legendary. For all its Hollywood trappings, The Bridge at Ramigan never lets you forget that this is a story written in blood, just yards from where it happened for real. Battle of Britain, 1969. How do you capture the thunder and dread of an entire nation under siege? You go straight to the source. Battle of Britain didn't just build sets. It commandeered real RAF airfields and historic locations across England, many of which had seen the dogfights and bombings of 1940 firsthand. Want to shoot a scramble scene? Film it at Duxford, a real wartime base. Want to feel the echo of Spitfires? Use the same hangars, runways, and countryside where pilots once raced to intercept the Luftwaffe. This was a production fueled by obsession. The filmmakers gathered over 100 authentic vintage aircraft. No digital shortcuts, just a symphony of engines and propellers roaring over the English countryside. Veterans visited the sets, sometimes choking up as they saw familiar machines taxi across familiar runways. The scale is staggering. Real castles, real city squares. Even the chalky cliffs of Dover stand in silent witness to recreated air raids. The British government and RAF gave unprecedented access, and the cast, Michael Caine, Robert Shaw, Christopher Plummer, were often awestruck, knowing they were acting where history had actually unfolded. The film didn't just tell the story, it relived it, clouded by the ghosts of the Blitz and the courage of outnumbered pilots. Critics were split. Some wanted more stories, less spectacle. But for aviation buffs, veterans, and anyone who's ever looked up at the English sky and wondered, what did it feel like? This movie delivers the answer, right down to the last smoky sunrise. Dunkirk, 2017. Some movies are love letters to history. Dunkirk is a gut punch. Christopher Nolan wanted audiences to feel the desperation and chaos of the 1940 evacuation, so he planted his cameras and cast right on the real beaches of Dunkirk, France. There's no substitute for seeing those endless sands, the gray channel, and the battered harbor walls, where over 300,000 men clung to hope and survival. Nolan went full throttle for authenticity. Real Spitfires soaring over the water, real ships, some veterans of the evacuation, sailing across the channel, and real French seacoast battered by wind and rain. Local townspeople joined the ranks of extras, and old-timers watched from a distance, remembering when the sky was filled with smoke and fear instead of camera cranes. The weather was a nightmare, the tides unpredictable, and the logistics a constant headache, just like in 1940. Nolan insisted on as many practical effects as possible. Explosions, sinking ships, even dragging boats up the beach by hand. The result? Every frame feels like a newsreel, not a Hollywood fantasy. The suspense isn't manufactured. It's built from the real geography and the weight of memory. Critics and veterans alike praise Dunkirk for immersing viewers in the chaos and silence of survival. You don't just watch it, you experience it. Standing on those beaches, the line between history and movie magic all but vanishes. The Thin Red Line, 1998. Hollywood rarely gets as close to the heart of war as Terrence Malick did with The Thin Red Line. Eschewing studio sets and tourist-friendly islands, Malick took his philosophical epic to the Solomon Islands, specifically Guadalcanal, the site of one of the Pacific's most savage and pivotal battles. The jungles, ridges, and rivers aren't just scenery, they're living testaments to what American and Japanese soldiers endured. Getting there was an odyssey in itself. The cast, Sean Penn, Jim Caviezel, Nick Nolte, and more, had to adapt to the humidity, the insects, and the endless green. Malick encouraged improvisation, letting the environment shape the performances. Sometimes the actors were just lost in the bush, mirroring the confusion and exhaustion of the real combatants. Local islanders worked as extras and guides, sharing their stories of ancestors who had witnessed the actual fighting. The production paid respect to the land, making offerings and clearing each site with tribal leaders before filming. The result is a movie drenched in the sweat and sorrow of real history. The tropical storms, the blinding sun, and the unrelenting march of ants all become part of the film's texture. When soldiers trudge through the grass or freeze at the sound of distant gunfire, it's not hard to believe you're glimpsing the shadow of war as it really happened. The Thin Red Line isn't just a war movie. It's a poetic haunting on sacred ground. So, does filming on real battlefields bring us closer to the truth, or just deeper into the myths we want to believe? Either way, these movies prove that when you roll cameras where history actually happened, every bullet, every scream, and every silent shadow hits differently. What's your take? Does authenticity on location make the difference, or can great storytelling win anywhere? Drop your thoughts in the comments, subscribe for more, and keep questioning the stories behind the screen. The past is closer than you think.